Like I said, in my case, my daughter, she's in college. She comes home from college, and summertime she has a job. During the winter break, it's kind of 4 or 5 weeks, so she doesn't have a job. She's kind of slouching around, hanging out with friends, doing what young people do. I don't have a problem with it myself, but now her mother, that's a whole nother situation. The People's Voice. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is The People's Voice. I am Treyevans, and I am The People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, we say hello and thank you to the returning listeners. We appreciate the support. This has been quite a ride, and we are enjoying our time. Hopefully, the information, as always, that we provide is assisting you in your journey, and also you're able to share that information with the family, the community, and your entire network. And to those who are new time listeners, welcome. We are glad to have you here as well. We hope that this information can be shared and somehow creates change within your life, in your family's life. As always, for everyone who's listening, if this information is valuable, please feel free to share it. Subscribe to the podcast so you can get the notifications each time that we put out a new episode. We drop new episodes every week, so you can subscribe on any podcast platform as well as on YouTube. We drop new videos at 3 p.m. every Friday regarding the podcast. But as always, again, thank you. So today I want to get into a topic that I am sure that, if not all, well, I wouldn't say all, but many people are dealing with, or at least have experienced or know someone. So basically, I can't say all, but today I want to talk about being a parent of an adult child. And I'm talking about this specifically because as I was going through some of the research this week for the podcast, not only did I have an experience as being an adult who has an adult child now, for those of you who listened before, if you just listening for the first time, I have a daughter. She's 19 years old. She's in college. And so she's an adult. And as she's getting older here, I'm trying to figure out how to balance the scale of support versus enabling, right? I'm dealing with that myself. And I was reading certain articles this week that were highlighting this very issue. And, clearly this is a huge issue for parents that have children, right? Children, they are small for a short amount of time, but they are big for a majority of the time, right? They're children only for a small period of time, and then they eventually become adults. And so today I want to talk about that process, talk about some of the data that I've read about where parents are today in terms of providing support to adult children. Also, some of the philosophies and theories that are out there regarding what that exactly should look like and how you should navigate that, and also, talk a little bit about parents that are struggling with this and what can be done to get over this hump. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about being a parent of an adult child, and with this conversation. This conversation should be relatable, and we should be able to provide some type of insight to help alleviate or at least ease some of the tension that comes with this. So what is that? What is being the parent of an adult? Well, going through some of the research here, I was reading a article here from Savings.com. Savings.com did a study back in April, and What they did was they basically looked at some of the challenges or some of the financial responsibility, I should say, that parents are providing for children, for adult children. And savings.com, along with the Pew Research Center, kind of put some numbers together regarding what that looks like. And so I want to go over that in this report. So I'm reading this report here from savings.com. And what they did was they basically did a study, like I said, for looking at adult children between the ages of 18 to 29, really focusing on that. Now, the study goes, well past 29 years old, but a lot of their key findings were within that age range, 18 to 29, which is basically Generation Z, I believe, at this point, or Z mixed with some millennials. But let's go through what they discovered, and then I'll give some more information. So some of their key findings, one of the big things that stood out to me was that over 50% of parents with an adult child provide some type of financial support. That was, I shouldn't say it was shocking, but it was shocking. Sometimes you assume it because you are taking care of an adult child, your friend is taking care of an adult child, but then you go, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But when you see the number, that's when the realization hits, like, wow, 50%. But here's where it really gets concerning. 62% of adult children living with their parents don't contribute at all to household expenses. And that's an area where I think all parents that have children that eventually become adults, because all of them will, that's where the struggle comes in. It's like, at what point do you say to your child, hey, you need to be contributing to the financial well-being of the home, right? Or at least to some of the expenses. Now, again, like I said, in my case, my daughter, she's in college. She comes home from college, and summertime she has a job. During this winter break, it's kind of 4 or 5 weeks, so she doesn't have a job. She's kind of slouching around, hanging out with friends, doing what young people do. I don't have a problem with it myself, but now her mother, that's a whole nother situation. Mom is not on board with that at all. She believes that the child needs to work 24/7, 365 days a year. And I'm like, well, she's just getting out into the world. Let's give her a chance. But anyway, I'm digressing. But so that stat, 62% of adult children live with parents, don't contribute to the household expenses at all. And so that raises the question, at what age should a child begin to contribute to the household expenses? I've seen, just going through some of these reports, they're saying, well, by the age of 20, you should take them off of the cell phone plan. And by 25, they should be, looking at or having their own health insurance. And I'm like, well, first of all, the world has changed greatly since I know since I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, you could, at 18, probably go get a store in the supermarket. A lot of times now, a lot of these jobs are being worked by adults. So, adults well into their 40s and 50s. So I don't know, what type of dynamic that would, how would you, it's tough trying to gauge that, is what I'm saying. But anyway, let me move on. So going back, some of the key findings from savings.com. Number one, 50% of parents with adult children provide some type of financial support. 62% of parents with adult children living with them say that the children don't contribute to any of the household expenses. On average, parents who financially support their children give them almost $1,000 per month. So I'm thinking, wow, right? So at first I'm like, who's giving their adult child $1,000 a month? But then again, as I read through the report, adult is 18. So they're including not just, regular expenses. They're talking about food, insurance, rent, cell phones, and tuition, and even travel. So again, I don't want to keep bringing it back to myself, but I had to stop and say, well, wait a second, I'm contributing like well over $1,000 a month in expenses for my child because I'm paying not only college tuition, but I'm paying cell phone, I'm paying for I'm paying for things, and so I can understand how this number is realistic. The thing about this study though is that again it says it really was focusing on children between 18 and 29. So I'm like, again, if a child is in college, we kind of need to be able to support that because the child is not in a position as yet to provide for themselves. But at the same time, it goes further in the study and starts analyzing some of the older children, and I'm going to talk about that as well. It also goes on here to say that parents who are still working, supporting their adult children, spend about 23% more on their children's expenses than they do into their own retirement savings. And then it also says that if their adult children need financial help, 1 in 4 parents said that they pull money out of their retirement account to assist, which, is really a tough space to be in because once your children become adults, you're not only looking forward to retiring because you put in all this work so you can provide and your children can have a comfortable lifestyle, but you also don't want to, you also do all this work so you can retire, but you don't want to retire and not be financially sound or financially comfortable yourself because you spent the last 20 years of your life before retirement, or 30 years or 10 years, whatever it is, before retirement, helping out your adult child, and now you're in retirement and you basically can't help yourself because that's going on. Also, that's a big issue in the United States and I'm sure around the world, the sandwich generation, where you have an adult child taking care of their parent and also taking care of their child. And that a lot of that is created from situations like this where parents taking care of adult children get to the point that they've spent all of their money taking care of their adult children that they can no longer take care of themselves when they're in retirement. Now they're depending on their children. So it's a mess. But so that was the key findings from the study. Again, this study was done by savings.com and they really pointed out those 4 facts. So what is the money being spent on, right? Because, again, when I was going through this last stat about parents who financially support their adult children, they basically give them about $1,000 a month. I'm like, well, what is the money going to? Because that's a lot of money, $1,000 a month. Well, they broke this down into categories. So basically, 88% of parents that have children that are parents of the Gen Z generation. And again, the Gen Z generation is those between 18 and 24. They're saying 18 and 24. No, 18 and 29. Yeah. So children born between 1996 and 2010. So that's the Gen Z generation. But anyway, going back, so breaking it down, parents of Gen Z, 88% of those parents said that they spend the majority of their money on groceries and food for Gen Z children. Parents of millennials, 65% on food. And then all parents, and this is parents that have adult children from 18 to beyond. I mean, there are children in their 40s and 50s who still live with their parents, which is a whole nother podcast, but let's stay focused. So 80% of overall parents said that the biggest expense that they have for their adult children are groceries and food. The next biggest expense is the cell phone. So again, Gen Z, many in college, just getting out into the world. A lot of parents are still paying for their cell phones. I pay for my daughter's cell phone, I know. But overall, 66% of parents said that they pay for their children's cell phone. And now the reason I'm highlighting this is because, again, this study is not just for 18 to 29-year-olds. This study basically went all the way up to 35 plus and older in terms of adults. And that number is shocking when I get to that, when I tell you about how many children or how many parents are taking care of their adult children that are 35 plus. But let me just go through the rest of the expenses. So the other expenses, rent and mortgage, about 59% overall of all parents are providing rent or mortgage for their adult children. Health insurance is about 50%. Then it goes down to leisure, discretionary spending, car, and then tuition, which obviously is a big one, especially with the cost of college these days. There's, I can't see the situation where the parent would not have to step in to assist with that, because you don't want, like for myself, I don't want my child graduating with $80,000 worth of debt. It's just insane to have to start your life that way. So, but going back, so those are just some of the expenses that are being paid by adults, by parents who have adult children that they're financially supporting. But what I wanted to talk about was the age of the adults that still are still relying on their parents for financial support. This number blew me out the water. So in the age group of, first of all, you have 18 to 19, you have 20% of those children are dependent on their parents for financial support, right? Makes sense, right? Fresh out of high school. The next group that they highlighted was those in the age range of 20 to 24 years old. And 44% of those children are dependent on their parents for financial support. Again, I can understand that since I am in that space currently, right? 20 years old, 22, just getting out of college, just getting started, relying on mom and dad to kind of help with support and getting the wings sort of to open up and fly. I can understand that. 25 to 29 years old, you have almost 17% of adult children relying on their parents for support. This is the number that I found rather disturbing. Almost 19% of adult children between the ages of 30 years old and up are relying on their parents for financial support. Now, I don't want to come off as sounding judgy because, listen, it's a struggle. Like I said, I am living, trying to understand the balance of how to go from support to enabling. But when you start to get to those age ranges, look, my dad, he provided, but he also told me about the 3 G's of life. Okay. And he said, once you get to a certain age, you either got to get a job, you got to go to college, or you got to get out. And it was understood, right? There was no gray lines in that. And that motivation, propelled. Now, of course, these days, that's, that type of parenting is not always seen as good, right? But listen, it was a different generation then. And it's a struggle for parents to try to balance that, right? It's like, how do you balance the support and the enabling factor? Matter of fact, let me play this clip from a parent who actually was talking about this on her channel. This is from the Smart Mom, who is on YouTube. And she was talking about, kind of dealing with the challenge of balancing her adult child. And in this situation, her child just had graduated high school, but hadn't figured out what the next steps were going to be, and she was kind of, trying to come up with a plan or making decision on what they needed to do next, collectively, her and her spouse. But I want to play that, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about what you can do and how you can balance between support and enabling. But let me play that.
It's a struggle, y'all. It really is a struggle being a parent of a young adult who's out of high school and just don't know what direction he wants to go. I am trying to be as supportive as I possibly can without, and still being stern. So I have to put my foot down at this point, and he's gonna have to go to school. I told him he needs to get a job and he needs to go to school. So
And so, as you heard in the clip there, she was, really at the point where it's like, well, what did I do? What should I do at this point? I've given him time to kind of figure it out, to see what does he want to do, but I need him to do something. And this is where a lot of parents struggle in terms of, am I being the mean parent? Am I being the motivating parent? Where am I at in terms of making sure that my child is being able to spread their wings and become a contributing member of society without my help. So it's a challenge for a lot of parents. So talking about enabling, right? And you got to kind of look at the signs to see whether you're enabling or whether you're supporting. And I'm getting an article here from betterhelp.com, and they talked about this, and it's basically when is enabling a bad thing? And they kind of pointed out and highlighted some interesting facts about whether or not you are an enabling parent and whether your child is going to seriously be dependent on you or is dependent on you, and maybe some of the things that you should do. So in terms of the signs that you're enabling a young adult child, the first thing that they pointed out here, and this is from betterhelp.com, they say, if they live with you and their living expenses are paid for, that might be a sign of enabling. Again, I think it's a fine line. 18 years old, they're fresh out of high school. It's going to take time for them to develop their own way in terms of financial support. So I'm not too big on that, but definitely once you start getting into that 25 to 30 and up, at some point, in my opinion, this is his opinion, you got to cut the umbilical cord. But they say if your child is living with you, you're paying expenses such as phone bill, car payment, and medical insurance, you may be enabling your adult child. If you're constantly helping them through financial crisis, every time there's an issue, they come to you, this may be a form of enabling. Rent is short, got to figure it out. They come to you without a plan. Car breaks down or car note is late, they come to you. So if you're constantly helping them through financial crisis, this may be a sign that you're enabling. They don't have a full-time job or even a part-time job after they graduated, as you just heard in this previous clip from the smart mom when she was talking about her son. That may be enabling. And again, I'm looking at myself. I'm like, well, my daughter's in college. She works in the summer, but am I enabling her? Should she be working while she's in school, while she's on winter break? So these are things that I'm considering myself. Parents constantly making sacrifices so their kids won't have to. If you're taking on 2 and 3 jobs to try to support your adult children, you may want to look at that to see if that's something that you can do. And the interesting part about this is that it shows, and I'm going to jump back here and I'm going to come back, but the that report from savings.com, they pointed out something very interesting. It showed basically who is supporting their children in terms of income, right? And it said here that basically parents who have an income of less than $30,000 are less likely to support their adult children, but parents who are making well over, or households that make well over $100,000 are 50% more likely to support their adult children, or provide financial assistance to their adult children. So, there's an interesting dynamic there. Now, obviously, if your household income is less than $30,000, it's tough to support another adult. But income does dictate how much support will be provided to your adult child. But going back to signs of enabling, also the last sign is if you're constantly worried that you're going to hurt your child's feelings, this may be a sign of enabling. And I struggle with that myself. Sometimes I'm like, well, I'm just going to do it for her so, she doesn't feel bad. But this is the balance that we deal with as parents. And so learning how to deal with this, I should say, identifying the signs of it, will help to be able to change the behavior of enabling and allowing the children to grow. Because there is a syndrome called failure to launch. And the failure to launch syndrome basically is when you have an adult child that is in the launching pad of life, so to speak, and they have not begun to fly. And that launching pad, or the failure of launch syndrome, some of those signs is that the child has lack of motivation. They're not engaged in any activities outside the home in terms of school or employment. They may withdraw a lot. Also starting school and then quit school, or they'll start a job and quit a job. So the failure to launch syndrome is very real, and it's something that is diagnosed within adult ages between 18 and 28. But these are the signs that your child may be in that or may have that syndrome, and you want to work through that to ensure that your child is able to take off and fly in the direction that you want them to do so. And just last but not least, talking about some of the things that you can do to ensure that your child will not only receive the message, but then also be able to act on the message. I'm reading here from thestreet.com, and they talk about a few ways that you can help your adult child from relying on you financially. One of those things is be transparent in your communication. Matter of fact, let me play this clip from the doctors where they talked about this in terms of providing a plan to help your child ascend from the adolescence of being financially dependent on you to spreading their own wings and flying. So let me play this, and then we'll close out from here.
Want them out. How do you transition
You
them
want
out?
them to be on the ramp to out so that they can have a nuclear family of their own or structure their adult life how they choose to. And so the fastest answer is financial. I can't tell you how many people I know in their 20s and 30s who are still on their parents' cell phone plan. They're not paying for their own cell phone. They're not paying for their own car insurance. Not only are they maybe not paying much or anything in utilities and rent, but if you are still financially supporting your adult child like they're a child, it would be dumb of them to try to move out.
Yeah.
That would be a silly financial choice.
So you need to make sure they're taking responsibility and treating them more like a roommate.
Right, that you're
rather than a
shifting
child.
that balance, that you say, this year, I'm gonna help with this, or these 6 months, I'm gonna help with this, but just so you know, 6 months from now, I'm gonna help with only this much. And then it's gonna be mostly your responsibility. And by the time you turn X age, or you've been with us for X number of months or years, I expect you to be financially independent, even if we're all still choosing to live in the same home. And usually around that point, they think, well, if I'm paying for all these things myself and I could have more privacy, why wouldn't I move out?
And I think that's great information. And that kind of goes into what I was getting ready to discuss from the article here on street.com. But making small increment changes, right? Making small suggestions, making small bridges in terms of creating the distance between dependence and independence. But I thought that was great information from the doctors. But going back, be transparent in your communication, as the doctor said, making sure that you're communicating that, hey, we're now moving into the next steps of life and you have to take on certain responsibilities, whether that's getting a job, bringing in groceries, driving to pick up to run errands, or just taking the initiative to do those things, to go to do the grocery shopping, to drop off the cleaning, things of that nature. We're now moving into a new set of circumstances, and you need to be more responsible. It says here, giving children an adequate timeline. Hey, as the doctor just said, 6 months from now, you're going to be paying this cell phone. So you need to figure out how you're going to pay this cell phone. If that means that you need to get a job while you're in college, or you need to, get a job during the summer and then save that money. But starting 6 months from now, you're going to be paying that cell phone. So setting an adequate timeline, they also suggest. Also provide the tools to succeed. Don't now, again, it's not just about pushing them out there and say, go figure it out. Educate your children. Give them the tools that is needed to make that transition, right? So if that just means educating them on what's next steps, how to fill out a job application, put a resume together for them, even to make connections within your network so they can get their first job of employment, that's fine. But providing the tools to ensure that they will succeed helps in terms of making sure that they have a higher possibility to succeed. It says here, you can give your children advice on your own point them towards a financial planner regarding various benefits, or if someone in your family is a financial planner or you're highly financially literate as well, explaining that process to them, but provide them with the tools so they can, be able to utilize those as they begin their ascent into independence. But the biggest thing here is be prepared to still feel responsible. And what happens sometimes is that the child becomes an adult. You give them all the tools, you give them the timeline and everything, and then you think, I'm done. And you send them out into the world, which, although they're out in the world, that doesn't change the fact that you still may have to support them at some point. Not nowhere near what you were doing, but still being a resource, more of an advisor than an actual contributor financially, so they can figure it out on their own. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, I know this from personal experience. Reading these articles and going through this data really made me have to stop and say, whoa, what am I doing? And I'm going to utilize some of these things because, and it's not about not wanting to support, but it's wanting to see your child become independent and do for themselves. So they can do just as you are now doing for yourself. So I hope this information was helpful. Like I said before, please feel free to share this information with your community and your network. I think it's beneficial information. I think it's something that all parents have dealt with or will deal with at some point. So, information is never a bad thing, especially when it comes to parenting, because I know, being a parent myself, we're always looking for an edge on how to be the best parent possible, even as the children become adults themselves. So that is my time for today. If you would like to contact us or keep in touch with us, please feel free to reach us on the social media platforms. You can reach us at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram. You can reach me at I am Trey Evans on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And your comments are welcome. We appreciate you taking out the time today to listen to the podcast. We understand that you can be utilizing your time to do something else, so the attention and the time is appreciated. As always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute. I am Trey Evans. The People's Voice.